So, first question. Who are you? What's your role? And where do you work?
I'm Shyam. I'm a principal engineer at AWS, and I've been a long-time member in the community. I've pretty much close to a decade now. As you can see, I've got the 110 shirt, which is from a while ago.
Now, what are 3 emerging Kubernetes tools that you are keeping an eye on?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of them. I think the ones that I'm keeping most closest eye on right now is definitely one of them is Crow, which is the Kubernetes Resource Orchestrator. It's a project, an open source project that started at AWS that's meant to model resources as a group of connected things that you need to deploy, and you can just replicate those, create application patterns, etc. Another one, which again I started here around auto scaling and node lifecycle management, is Carpenter. It's a project that has been around for a while and it's gained substantial adoption, and I'm looking forward to what we do there for some of the next generation auto scaling challenges with AI/ML workloads.
When a Kubernetes cluster needs to register nodes that aren't created by the same infrastructure provider, what's the safest way to handle identity, certificate issuance, and trust during onboarding?
Yeah, so when you bring up nodes, there are a few things you need to take care of. You need to give it the right credentials to talk to the control plane. If you need it to talk to other cloud services, for instance, with AWS, you need IAM credentials. You need to be able to figure out how to set those too. So for a lot of these, it helps to use one of the established standardized ways to do things, which would let you follow the same model that you follow in the cloud. So for instance, with EKS hybrid nodes, you can run your nodes on the edge. You can run them on premise, or you can run them on other cloud providers as well. So it helps you set up, bootstrap the things like certificates for node credentials, or if you want to use other authentication modes where you, for example, with hybrid nodes, you can do something called systems manager activations, where you register the node with the cloud and you get an activation back and you use those to get credentials. So this sort of greatly simplifies your things like, besides the bootstrap itself, things like being able to rotate your credentials, being able to revoke your credentials, etc.
How do you manage upgrades, patches, and configuration drift when some Kubernetes nodes come from your own hardware or edge locations and others come from automated infrastructure?
Yeah, that's an interesting one too. So we treat hybrid nodes or nodes running outside of the cloud as self-managed nodes, the way you would self-manage if you were to run Kubernetes nodes in your own cluster. But there are a bunch of things you want to take care of when you manage these upgrades. You're typically managing these upgrades yourself. If you want to do it in a rolling fashion where you have spare capacity and you can bring up new nodes and gracefully drain the old nodes and just move your pods over and terminate them. If you don't have spare capacity and you have to, for instance, patch a component in place or even patch the node in place, you could use Node ADM, which is a command line sort of tool that is built by EKS for being able to bootstrap and manage operations like upgrades, for example, on your nodes. And it's the same tool that's also used inside the cloud for bootstrapping your EKS managed nodes. So it gives you a nice consistent experience across both.
If part of your Kubernetes worker pool runs outside the core cluster network, what patterns enable reliability, control plane connectivity, and service communication without breaking isolation or performance?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways actually you can configure connectivity between your hybrid nodes and the Kubernetes control plane. Let's say if it's running inside the cloud, so in this case inside an AWS VPC managed by EKS, you can either reach directly through the public internet if you have network egress from your on-premise network. But the recommended way typically is to sort of, if you're, for example, latency sensitive and you do not want your traffic to go through the public internet, you want private connectivity, you would opt in for something like a direct connect between your on-premise network and the AWS parent region VPC, or site-to-site VPN, or potentially other VPN solutions of your choice. And it's important to ensure that you use TLS everywhere possible, and also be able to restrict the permissions. For instance, there's this feature in EKS where you can restrict the CIDR ranges or the set of IPs that you're allowed to communicate. If you use, for instance, the public internet mode to connect. So you can boil that down to the absolute set of IPs you need. And
Kubernetes turned 10 years old last year. What should we expect in the next 10 years?
Yeah. So I've been fortunate enough to see most of the last 10 years. I'm getting close to a decade now in the community. So I've seen a lot of things happen, a lot of trends as well. But one thing which I could see consistently is we kept raising the abstractions. What started as infrastructure soon started becoming constructs for applications. And from there on, we now moved with projects like Crow. We are moving to higher level abstractions for applications around being able to use Kubernetes as a much better platform. And there's a whole wave of workloads now that have just hit us. And I think it's going to be very interesting because we will need to add a lot of fine-grained capabilities for what potentially were esoteric problems before. And it needs to be done without actually increasing complexity of Kubernetes, which a lot of users already struggle to grapple with today. So it's going to be an interesting challenge for all of us ahead.
What's next for you?
I guess I'm going to help with this and chip away parts of these problems one by one and try to make users' life easy.
How can people get in touch with you?
They can either come to the AWS booth, or they're more likely to probably find me in one of the hallways in Project Pavilion, or you can just message me on Slack in Kubernetes workgroup. My Slack ID is Shyam JVS, SHYAM JVS, or you can message me on LinkedIn.